Is there a reason they've been hiding electric vehicles from us for over 100 years? Like, when do you think the world's first electric car was invented? Was it in 2008 when Tesla first revealed the Roadster to the world? Nope. Maybe it was in 1996 with the revolutionary EV1 from General Motors. Not even close. The first commercially viable electric car was the Baker electric vehicle in 1909. Yup, we had electric cars over 100 years ago, and then they just kinda disappeared for a while, and I bet you can guess who was behind it all. This car here could go 70 miles on one charge and up to 25 miles per hour. Not the fastest, but still better than a typical horse-drawn carriage back then, which would cap at around 10 miles per hour. What happened here? Like, why did this fall off, and what took EVs so long to gain mainstream appeal like they have today? Well, in 1908, they actually held a race in Philadelphia between a gas-powered car and an electric one to see which one is better and which we should use in society. They raced through the crowded streets where they had to stop at intersections, wait for pedestrians, and swerve around horse-drawn buggies. In the end, the Studebaker electric car won by 10 whole minutes. It dominated, yet it was never adopted by the public. Often called the horseless electric carriage back then, they were easier to turn on, had faster acceleration and braking, no exhaust and no combustion happening under your seat. And of course, it didn't need gas, just an electric charge, which is much cheaper. Better for the customer, not so good for the companies that profit off them, and this may have been the start of their downfall. Say hello to our good friends, the oil and gas industrial complex. It really did seem promising at first, with the electric vehicle company EVC being the biggest car manufacturer in the US in the late 1800s before Henry Ford took over. So what in the world happened here? Well, first, the EVC was accused of loan fraud that bankrupted the company in 1902. I wonder who could have possibly led the investigation that resulted in that. Then, conveniently, in 1903, Henry Ford starts banging out gas-powered cars in his revolutionary assembly line process, which saw enormous success, adopting the general notion that gas was just a better product. On top of that, lack of charging ports out in the countryside made electric cars more limited and cumbersome. And in general, electric cars were not only more expensive, but were generally marketed towards women who didn't drive as much as men back then. So there wasn't much of a target audience for EVs. Even Clara Ford, Henry Ford's wife herself, owned and drove an electric car. Men, the primary market for cars during that time, preferred gas, as they were cheaper, faster, more powerful, and just portrayed as more manly in general. By the 1920s, the electric car was pretty much out of the market. Not because they were necessarily inferior vehicles, but rather due to price, lack of infrastructure, feminine marketing, and a very convenient bankruptcy. Which admittedly, lack of electric charging stations around the country is a pretty valid reason. But then again, we didn't have many gas stations yet either. Supplying cars with gasoline just happens to result in more long-term profit than charging them with electricity. And this actually goes back even further, with a couple of prototype EVs in the 1800s. In 1899, the Belgian La Jamais Content broke the 100km/h speed barrier for the first time in history, reaching a speed of 105 kilometers an hour. It was an electric vehicle. In 1888, what is considered the first electric car ever appeared in Germany, the Flocken Elektrowagen, invented by entrepreneur Andreas Flocken, and could reach a very humble 15 kilometers an hour. But the deeper you look, the further back in time EVs go. In 1881, Gustav Truve introduced the first electric carriage, which was more of a tricycle and not technically considered a car yet, in Paris that could also go 15 kilometers an hour. Go back 50 years before then to Scotland's Robert Anderson, who built his own motorized electric carriage around 1832. Batteries weren't even rechargeable yet back then, so it was more of a party trick than an actual transportation device, coming in at 6 kilometers an hour and a range of about 2.5 kilometers before it needed entirely new batteries. Ironically, this one also used crude oil to generate the electric charge in the battery, so it kinda doesn't count. But more recently, car manufacturers tried to revive the electric vehicle trend, like in 1996 with the EV1 from GM, a pretty futuristic looking car for its time, which was a total flop, and they quickly scrapped it in favor of more Hummers, SUVs, and more gas-guzzling vehicles. You see, electric cars are nothing new. In fact, they even predate some of the earliest gas-powered cars in history. But when one option can produce way more long-term profit than the other, history tends to go the route that is more profitable to the companies behind it. So much that it literally took an independent billionaire to start his own electric car company in the mid-2000s to finally bring it it to mainstream production. And hey, I'm not saying EVs are perfect. Far from it. In fact, they kinda scare me. We've all seen the brutal cobalt mines that are needed to make these batteries and how harmful those can be. And also the sorta concerning totalitarian access that governments and companies have to electric vehicles, being able to control and disable them remotely essentially whenever they want. But it really just makes you wonder what other revolutionary products and systems have been invented in the past that never saw the light of day because of profit.